Vorthak entered the advanced training hall like a walking storm. His massive 8-foot frame cast shadows across the polished floor, and his crystal scales caught every light in the room, turning him into a living prism of deadly beauty. The other students automatically stepped aside when he passed, not from respect, but from instinctive fear. His training routine had become legendary among academy students. Every evening at 1900 hours, he claimed the advanced combat simulator for exactly 2 hours. During this time, he would destroy holographic opponents with casual efficiency that made veteran instructors shake their heads in amazement. Tonight was no different as he approached the simulator controls. The machine hummed to life and projected his first opponent, a massive Bruton warrior programmed with the fighting skills of their greatest champions. Crick studied the hologram for exactly 3 seconds, then exploded into motion. His opening attack was devastating. The crystal scales along his right arm flared bright white as he channeled energy through them. His fist connected with the holographic Bruton chest with enough force to cave in real armor plating. The hologram flickered and collapsed in under 10 seconds. The simulator immediately generated a new opponent this time. A 4-armed Kalari fighter programmed with lightning-fast reflexes and perfect coordination. Crix adjusted his stance and waited for the attack. The holographic Kalari launched into a complex spinning assault that would have overwhelmed most fighters. Crick simply stepped forward and grabbed 2 of the attacking arms. His crystal scales provided perfect grip as he lifted the hologram off its feet and slammed it into the simulator floor. The Kalari fighter dissolved into pixels after lasting exactly 15 seconds. Student after student had gathered outside the training hall to watch through the observation windows. They filmed everything on their personal devices, already planning to share footage of tomorrow guaranteed victory. Most had never seen combat skills at this level, and whispered in amazement at each devastating technique. The simulator generated opponent after opponent. Each hologram was programmed with the absolute best fighting techniques of its species. Vorthon warriors, Kalari dancers, Bruton titans, Zaraki assassins, human marines, Telnari berserkers. Every major fighting tradition in the galaxy was represented. Crix destroyed them all. His signature move was something he called the spine shatter, a devastating uppercut that channeled energy through his crystal scales and delivered enough force to break reinforced bone. The technique had ended 43 real matches and countless training sessions. Every opponent who faced it went down immediately. Then there was his scale storm attack, where he would spin his entire body while extending his arms. The crystal scales along his limbs would create a whirling barrier of destruction that no opponent had ever successfully penetrated. The attack looked like a living tornado of sharp edges and crushing force. But his most feared technique was the apex drop, a finishing move so brutal that professional combat sports had banned it completely. Only academy training allowed its use under carefully controlled conditions. The move involved jumping high into the air and coming down with both fists charged with crystal scale energy. The impact could crack reinforced flooring as Crix worked through his training routine, demolishing holographic opponents with mechanical precision. Word spread throughout the academy about tomorrow match. Students from all 12 species gathered in common areas to discuss what they expected to witness. So, fourth-hand students were particularly excited because one of their own was about to demonstrate their species' natural superiority. Dex Morvain held court in the main cafeteria, describing in detail how Crix would destroy the silent human girl. He gestured wildly with his massive arms as he predicted the match would last less than 30 seconds. The human students felt differently. Most were embarrassed that one of their own had been matched against the academy champion. Tay tried to organize a group to speak with the instructors about changing the match assignment. He argued that putting Hana against Crix was essentially sanctioned bullying, but the instructors refused to intervene. They explained that combat assignments were generated by computer algorithm based on student progress reports and psychological profiles. The system had determined that this particular match would provide valuable learning opportunities for both participants. Instructor Valak found himself in an unusual position. His warrior instincts told him that the match was a terrible mismatch that would likely result in serious injury. But his teaching experience suggested that sometimes the most unexpected situations produced the most important lessons. He decided to speak with both students privately to ensure they understood what they were facing. Tomorrow evening he called Crix to his office. The massive Vorthon warrior filled the doorway. As he entered, his crystal scales dim in the soft lighting. Valak asked if Crix had any concerns about fighting a human opponent who had never participated in combat training. The champion laughed and his scales flashed bright colors indicating amusement. He explained that he had fought humans before during interview academy competitions and found them to be adequate opponents but nothing exceptional. When asked about his strategy for the match, Crix described his plan to end things quickly with minimum damage. He would use a basic stunning technique to incapacitate Hana without causing permanent injury. It would be a mercy victory that demonstrated his skill while protecting a weaker opponent. The next morning, Valak called Hana to his office. She arrived exactly on time, carrying her worn training bag and wearing her standard gray uniform. Her dark eyes met his without fear or anxiety. Just the same calm observation that characterized all her interactions. Valak offered her the opportunity to withdraw from the match. He explained that no one would think less of her for refusing to face an opponent so far beyond her apparent skill level. The academy had provisions for students who were not ready for advanced combat situations. Hana listened politely to everything he said. When he finished speaking, she thanked him for his concern and assured him that she would be ready for tomorrow. Match. Her voice remained soft and steady without any indication of worry or doubt. That evening, the betting pools reached record levels. Students were wagering everything, from meal credits to personal possessions on various aspects of the match. Most bets focused on how quickly Crix would win, with the average prediction being under 45 seconds. A few creative students placed bets on whether Hana would land a single blow, whether she would attempt to run away, or whether she would surrender before the match officially began. The odds on any of these outcomes were so extreme that even small bets promised huge payouts in the advanced dormitory section, reserved for senior students. Crix prepared for bed with his usual methodical routine. He reviewed his opponent files, studied basic human anatomy, and selected the techniques he would use tomorrow. His preparation was professional and thorough, just like everything else he did. The match was scheduled for 1400 hours in the main combat arena. Every seat had been reserved and viewing screens were set up in common areas throughout the academy. Some estimates suggested that over 2,000 students and faculty would witness what everyone expected to be the shortest match in academy history. In her small first-year dormitory room, Hana sat quietly on her narrow bed. Her training journal lay open beside her, filled with 3 months of detailed observations about fighting techniques, weaknesses, and timing patterns. She had recorded everything she needed to know about Vorthon combat methods as the academy settled into evening quiet cycle. Hana closed her journal and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow she would face the greatest warrior the academy had produced in over a decade. Everyone expected her to lose quickly and badly. But Hana had spent 3 months learning secrets that no one else had bothered to discover. She had watched every species, every technique, every movement, until she understood things that even the instructors had missed. Tomorrow the silent observer would finally speak, but she would do it without saying a single word. The main combat arena had never held so many spectators in its 50-year history. Every seat was filled with students, faculty, and even visiting dignitaries from the Galactic Council who had heard rumors about the unprecedented mismatch. The arena floor gleamed under bright combat lights, while massive viewing screens displayed close-up angles for those in the back rows. Betting pools had crashed the academy financial systems twice during the morning as students wagered impossible amounts. On the outcome, security officers moved through the crowds trying to maintain order, as excitement reached dangerous levels. Some fights had broken out between species groups arguing about combat superiority. The arena itself was a perfect circle of reinforced steel surrounded by energy barriers designed to contain even the most violent combat. The floor was marked with traditional combat rings from 12 different worlds, honoring the diverse fighting traditions represented at the academy. Medical stations were positioned at regular intervals, staffed with trauma specialists from multiple species. At exactly 1300 hours, the preliminary matches began. Lower-year students faced off in standard training bouts that would normally draw moderate attention. But today, these matches served only as warm-up entertainment for the main event. Everyone was waiting for 1400 hours when the impossible would attempt to challenge the inevitable in the preparation chambers beneath. The arena Crix Vorthak went through his pre-combat ritual with mechanical precision. He stretched each massive muscle group, performed breathing exercises to center his crystal scale energy, and reviewed his planned techniques one final time. His ritual had been perfected over 3 years and never varied by even a single movement. His crystal scales gradually shifted from their normal dark obsidian color to the bright white that indicated full combat readiness. The transformation was beautiful and terrifying as energy coursed through his body like liquid lightning. His eyes took on the focused intensity of a predator preparing to strike. Team members from his advanced combat class gathered around offering encouragement and tactical advice. They discussed the best ways to end the match quickly, while minimizing damage to his obviously outclassed opponent. Several suggested that he should make an impressive display of his skills for the cameras. Meanwhile, in the smaller preparation chamber, reserved for lower-year students, Hana Kim sat quietly on a simple metal bench. She had arrived exactly 30 minutes before her scheduled match time, and immediately began her own preparation routine, which consisted entirely of sitting still and breathing steadily. Her roommate Nari had begged permission to stay with her during preparation. The gentle Kalari girl paced nervously around the small room, gesturing with all 4 arms as she described every injury she had ever seen Crix inflict. On previous opponents, her blue skin had turned pale with worry, and her voice kept rising in pitch. Other human students had also gathered in the chamber hoping to offer support or advice. Tay brought energy drinks and protein supplements that he claimed would help her survive the first few attacks. Several others offered to speak with the referee about stopping the match early if things went badly. Hana accepted their concern gracefully, but declined all offers of help. She continued her steady breathing and occasionally stretched her arms and legs with simple movements that looked more like casual limbering than serious combat preparation. Her expression remained calm and focused without any sign of fear or anxiety. At 13:30 hours, arena announcers began building excitement for the main event. They recited Crix's combat record in detail, while displaying holographic replays of his most devastating victories. The crowd cheered loudest when they showed his signature, spine-shatter technique destroying a massive Bruton opponent. When they introduced Hana, the announcers struggled to find impressive accomplishments to highlight. Her academic record was excellent, and her theoretical knowledge was outstanding, but her combat experience consisted entirely of watching other people fight. The crowd response was polite but clearly skeptical. Instructor Valek made a final visit to both preparation chambers to ensure his students were ready. He found Crix performing advanced energy channeling exercises that made his crystal scales glow like miniature suns. The massive warrior acknowledged his instructor with a respectful nod and confirmed he was ready to begin in Hana chamber. Valek discovered her sitting exactly as she had been for the past hour, still breathing steadily and watching everything with those dark, observant eyes. When he asked if she had any final questions, she smiled slightly and assured him she was prepared for whatever happened. The final, preliminary match ended at 13:55 hours, and arena workers quickly cleared the combat floor. The energy barriers hummed to full power while medical teams took their positions. The crowd noise reached thunderous levels as anticipation peaked for the most lopsided match in Academy history. At exactly 1400 hours, the arena lights dimmed and dramatic music began playing. Crix emerged from the main tunnel to explosive cheers from the Vorthen section and respectful applause. From everyone else, his crystal scales caught every light beam, turning him into a living constellation of deadly beauty. He raised his massive arms to acknowledge the crowd and performed his traditional pre-combat display. The ritual involved a series of intimidating poses designed to demonstrate his power and break his opponent's will before fighting even began. Each movement was perfectly calculated to create maximum psychological impact. The crowd fell silent when Hana emerged from the smaller tunnel. She looked impossibly tiny under the bright arena lights, wearing standard combat gear that seemed too large for her small frame. Her entrance music was the Academy default selection, and she walked to the center ring without any dramatic gestures. The contrast between the two fighters was so extreme that several spectators wondered aloud if this was some kind of elaborate joke. The betting pools had long since stopped accepting wagers because the outcome seemed predetermined. Even the medical staff looked nervous about what they might need to treat. Referee Tane, a neutral Kalari official with over 20 years of combat judging experience, called both fighters to the center ring. His forearms moved in the traditional gestures. As he explained the rules, standard academy combat protocols would apply with no lethal techniques allowed, and the match ending only through submission, unconsciousness, or medical intervention. Both fighters acknowledged the rules with formal bows, though the size difference made even this simple ceremony look absurd. Crix towered over Hana like an adult over a small child, and his crystal scales cast rainbow patterns across her plain gray uniform. The referee raised his upper right arm to signal the start of combat positioning. The crowd leaned forward in their seats as recording devices focused on the center ring. Spectators held their breath, waiting for what everyone expected would be the shortest match in Academy history. Crix dropped into his famous apex stance with crystal scales bristling with contained energy. His massive frame coiled like a spring ready to unleash devastation. The stance was a work of art, combining perfect balance, explosive power, and intimidating presence. Hana simply stood relaxed with her hands at her sides, watching her opponent with the same calm attention she had shown during 3 months of combat classes. She made no attempt to assume any recognized fighting stance or display any defensive preparations. The arena fell completely silent except for the hum of energy barriers and the soft breathing of 2,000 spectators. The referee looked at both fighters, confirmed they were ready, and raised his arm for the final countdown. 3 seconds of absolute silence stretched like hours as the entire academy held its breath. The referee arm dropped and the match began. Crix exploded forward with the force of a missile launch. His massive crystal-scaled legs propelled his 8-foot frame across the combat ring faster than most eyes could track. The sound of his movement was like thunder rolling through the arena, as 2,000 spectators watched what they expected to be the shortest match in Academy history. His opening attack was the legendary spine shatter, the devastating uppercut that had ended 43 previous matches in the first few seconds. His right fist channeled brilliant white energy through crystal scales that gleamed like captured starlight. The punch carried enough force to shatter reinforced steel and had never failed to immediately incapacitate any opponent. But when his fist reached the spot where Hana had been standing, she was no longer there. The tiny human girl had moved like flowing water, sliding past his massive attacking arm, with a grace that seemed to defy physics. Her movement was so smooth and effortless that it looked almost casual, like she was simply stepping aside to let someone pass in a hallway. As Crix's fist cut through empty air where her head should have been, Hana's small hand touched his extended wrist for just a fraction of a second. The contact was gentle, almost like a friendly pat, but something impossible happened in that brief moment. The unstoppable force of Crix's attack suddenly changed direction. His own tremendous momentum carried him forward, but now he was moving where he had not intended to go. The champion warrior, who had never been off balance in 3 years of competition, stumbled like a first-day cadet. The crowd gasped in confusion. This was not supposed to happen. The mighty Crix Vorthak did not stumble. The Academy greatest fighter did not miss his signature technique. Betting pools crashed as viewers tried to understand what their eyes had just witnessed. Crix recovered quickly because his training was perfect, and his reflexes were honed by years of combat experience. He spun into his second signature technique, the scale storm that had never been successfully countered by any opponent in Academy history. His entire body became a whirling tornado of destruction as crystal scales extended from his arms and torso, creating a barrier of sharp edges and crushing force. The technique looked like a living hurricane made of diamond blades and channeled lightning. No opponent had ever found a way through the scale storm. The arena floor vibrated from the power of his spinning attack. Energy crackled between his crystal scales, creating a light show that hurt to watch directly. The sound was like 100 swords being sharpened at once, mixed with the deep hum of contained power. Hana watched the spinning warrior with those dark, calm eyes that had observed every combat class for 3 months. She stood perfectly still as the scale storm built to full intensity, then stepped forward at exactly the right moment. Her timing was so precise that she seemed to walk through the whirling death trap like it was made of air. She passed between spinning crystal scales that should have cut her to pieces, moving with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where every blade would be. The crowd fell completely, silent as the impossible continued to happen. The scale storm that had destroyed dozens of opponents simply parted around the small human girl, like she was protected by invisible armor. Hana emerged from the whirling attack, completely unharmed, and stepped close to the spinning Vorthan warrior. Her elbow moved in a small, precise arc that connected with the soft scales at the base of Crick's neck, just below his crystal armor plating. The impact looked gentle, barely more than a light tap, but the effect was immediate and devastating. Crick's crystal scales suddenly went dark, like someone had turned off a power switch. His spinning attack collapsed as his legs wobbled beneath him. The mighty champion who had never lost a single match swayed on, unsteady feet, his eyes unfocused and confused. 8 feet of legendary Vorthan warrior suddenly looked as helpless as a newborn trying to walk. The crowd stared in shocked silence as their greatest fighter struggled to remain standing. Medical sensors throughout the arena began beeping frantically as they detected the sudden change in Crick's vital signs. His crystal scale energy had dropped to nearly 0, and his nervous system was showing signs of complete disruption. The readings made no sense to the automated systems. Hana stepped back and waited. She made no attempt to press her advantage or deliver a finishing blow. Instead, she watched calmly as the Academy champion tried to understand what had happened to his body. The same patient observation she had shown during months of combat training. Crix tried to channel energy through his crystal scales, but nothing happened. The scales remained dark and lifeless like ordinary stone. His massive strength was still there, but the energy that made Vorthan warriors so dangerous had simply vanished. Desperation drove him to attempt his most feared technique, the brutal apex drop that was banned in professional combat. He gathered his remaining strength and launched himself into the air, intending to come down with both fists and crush his opponent through sheer physical force. The jump was clumsy and unfocused, lacking the precise control that made the technique so dangerous. Crix descended toward Hana like a falling boulder, driven by gravity and desperation rather than skill and timing. Hana moved with the same flowing motion she had used throughout the brief match. She stepped aside as easily as avoiding a dropped object, and Crix crashed to the arena floor with a sound like breaking stone. The impact shook the entire combat ring and sent vibrations through the spectator stands. Crystal scales cracked against the reinforced flooring as the champion warrior hit with enough force to dent steel. His massive body bounced once, then lay still. He tried to rise, pushing himself up on hands and knees with the determination of a warrior who refused to accept defeat. But his body would not obey his commands. His crystal scales remained dark. His energy centers stayed offline, and his nervous system continued to malfunction. Crix collapsed again, this time staying down as his body finally accepted what his mind could not understand. He had been defeated by a first-year student who had never participated in a single combat match. His legendary record was broken by a girl who barely came up to his chest. The arena remained silent, except for the soft hum of medical scanners and the quiet breathing of 2,000 shocked spectators. Hana stood over the fallen champion, completely calm and not even breathing hard from the brief encounter. She looked up at the referee and gave a single small nod. The gesture was simple and polite, like someone acknowledging the end of a pleasant conversation, but it carried the weight of absolute victory achieved through impossible means. Referee Tain stared at the scene before him in complete confusion. His 20 years of combat judging had never prepared him for anything like this. The Academy greatest warrior lay defeated on the arena floor while his tiny opponent stood unmarked and relaxed. Medical teams rushed onto the combat ring as the referee finally remembered his duties and declared the match over. The impossible had become reality, and the galaxy would never look at human fighters the same way again. In the stands, spectators began to stir from their shocked silence. Voices rose in questions, theories, and disbelief as they tried to process what they had witnessed. The betting pools that had crashed were now facing payouts that threatened to bankrupt the entire academy. The silent observer had finally spoken, and her message was clear to everyone who had witnessed it. The age of underestimating humanity was over. The medical team reached Crix within seconds of his collapse, their scanners beeping frantically as they checked his vital signs. The readings confused everyone because the fallen champion showed no signs of physical injury. His crystal scales were intact, his bones were unbroken, and his muscles showed no damage from impact. Dr. Yellen, the head medical officer, ran her scanner over Crick's unconscious form 3 times before accepting what the instruments told her. The mighty Vorthan warrior had been defeated by a precise strike to his central nervous system that temporarily shut down his entire energy network. Within 5 minutes, Crix began to stir, his crystal scales gradually returning to their normal dark gleam. His eyes opened slowly and focused on the arena ceiling above him. The confusion on his face was clear as he tried to remember what had happened to end his legendary winning streak. He sat up slowly with medical assistance and looked across the arena floor to where Hana still stood waiting patiently. The defeated champion studied his opponent as if seeing her for the first time. His warrior mind finally began to understand that he had not lost to luck or accident, but to superior skill. The arena remained in stunned silence as medical teams confirmed that Crix would recover completely. The strike that had defeated him caused no permanent damage, but had temporarily disrupted the nerve pathways that allowed Vorthan warriors to channel energy through their crystal scales. News reporters from across the galaxy pushed forward, demanding interviews and explanations. The betting pools were in chaos, as impossible payouts threatened to crash the Academy economic systems. Security officers struggled to maintain order, as students and faculty tried to process what they had witnessed. Hana walked calmly to the center of the arena, where microphones and cameras waited. Her dark eyes showed no excitement or pride, just the same patient observation that had characterized her 3 months at the Academy. When the first reporter asked how she had defeated the legendary Crix Vorthak, she spoke clearly for everyone to hear. She explained that she came from Earth Mountain regions, where her grandfather had taught her ancient fighting techniques that focused on patience observation and using an opponent's strength against them. The martial art was nearly extinct because it required years of study, and most people preferred faster, more aggressive fighting styles. Her grandfather had warned her that such knowledge carried great responsibility. She had come to the Academy not to fight, but to learn about other species and their combat methods. The months of silent observation had taught her more about galactic fighting techniques than most warriors learned in years of active training. The revelation sent shockwaves through the military establishment. Representatives from 12 different species had assumed that humans were physically inferior because they lacked crystal scales, multiple arms, massive strength, or other obvious advantages. But Hana had demonstrated something far more dangerous. She had shown that physical advantages could become weaknesses if someone understood how to exploit them. The crystal scales that made Vorthan warriors so powerful had specific nerve connection points that could be disrupted with precise strikes. The multiple arms of Kalari fighters moved in predictable patterns that could be anticipated and countered. The spinning attacks that seemed impossible to defeat had timing gaps that patient observation could identify. The massive strength of Bruton warriors created momentum that could be redirected against them. Every species fighting style that seemed superior had hidden vulnerabilities. Military analysts across the galaxy began emergency meetings to reassess human combat potential. Intelligence services that had dismissed Earth fighters as minor threats suddenly realized they had made critical errors in their strategic planning. General Thax, the Vorthan military commander who had been visiting the Academy, stood in the arena reviewing scanner recordings of the match. His tactical staff surrounded him as they analyzed every movement frame by frame, trying to understand how their species' greatest advantage had been neutralized so easily. The technique Hana had used was so advanced that most combat specialists had only heard rumors of its existence. Ancient texts mentioned nerve strikes that could disable energy channels, but the knowledge was considered theoretical rather than practical. Admiral Kess, representing the Kalari naval forces, watched the recordings with growing concern. Her species had dominated space combat for centuries based on their superior reflexes, and coordination. But if humans could predict and counter their movement patterns, that advantage might be meaningless. Commander Vorg from the Bruton ground forces studied the match data with his engineering staff. They had built their entire military doctrine around overwhelming physical superiority. But the recordings showed how superior strength could be turned into a liability through precise timing and positioning. In the days following the match, Hana returned to her quiet corner of the combat training room. But everything had changed. The other students no longer saw a weak observer who was afraid to fight. They saw someone who had revealed the weakness in every fighting style they thought was superior. Her former classmates approached with new respect, asking questions about human fighting techniques that she answered patiently, but incompletely. She explained basic principles of observation and timing, but kept the deeper secrets of her grandfather training to herself. Instructor Falek found himself studying his own species' combat methods with new eyes. He had spent decades perfecting Vorthon fighting techniques, but now wondered what other vulnerabilities he had never noticed. His teaching methods began to change as he emphasized observation and analysis over pure aggression. The academy curriculum underwent emergency revision. Combat instructors from all 12 species were ordered to develop new training programs that addressed the weaknesses Hana had exposed. Students who had relied entirely on their natural advantages were forced to learn more complete fighting systems. Recruitment policies changed as military academies across the galaxy began actively seeking human students. Earth colonies that had been ignored by galactic military forces suddenly found themselves receiving official visits from high-ranking officers. But the most significant change was in how other species viewed humanity. Physical strength meant nothing if it could be redirected. Multiple limbs became liabilities if their coordination could be predicted. Even the legendary advantages that had made certain species dominant for millennia had exploitable weaknesses. The quiet girl who had sat in the back corner of combat class had changed everything. The galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Other species had built their fighting styles around natural advantages, but humans had learned to fight without any advantages at all. They had learned to study, to wait, to observe, until they found the weakness in any strength. They had developed patience that could outlast aggression, intelligence that could counter raw power, and techniques that could turn any advantage into a disadvantage as news of the match spread across inhabited worlds. Military planners realized they faced a new reality. The galaxy apex predators had been sharing their training facilities with something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Humanity had not been hiding their combat abilities out of fear or weakness. They had been learning, studying every technique, every advantage, every species' specific strength, until they understood how to defeat them all. The age of assuming human inferiority was over, and the galaxy would never be the same.